Okay, so you know those audio snippets you sent us from my SmartPodcast channel? The ones focused on, like English conversation practice.
Right.
We're going to take a deep dive into those today. We're going to unpack those seemingly simple conversations and see what we can learn about the way people talk to each other.
Yeah.
How they view the world.
Yeah.
And even how we all handle, different life situations.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how those little pieces of conversation, they can actually be like little case studies in human interaction.
That's true.
Like we have a bunch of different scenarios here, from figuring out if you'd rather live in a village or a city, to deciding whether or not to get a pet, to like dealing with a breakup.
Yeah. So we're going to start with the discussion about the pros and cons of village life versus city life.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to a conversation about, the big decision of getting a pet.
Right.
And then finally, we'll get into a more sensitive conversation about dealing with a breakup.
Sounds good.
So first, let's dive into this whole village versus city thing.
Okay, so the main question here is like, do you prefer living in a village or a city?
Right.
We hear Harry and Patrick kind of, starting this off with their own opinions. Patrick likes the peace and quiet of the village and being close to nature.
Yeah, and Harry. He's lived in both, right?
Yeah.
And he makes this really smart point that it's not like a simple either kind of choice.
Right.
Like he talks about the pros and cons of each. And it's funny how they actually explain what that phrase means in the podcast, which is pretty helpful for listeners.
Yeah, it's like a built-in English lesson.
Right.
Yeah.
And as they start exploring, those advantages and disadvantages, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Patrick talks about how people in villages really support each other and, like there's a strong sense of community. But then he admits that you might not have all the fancy facilities and stuff that you find in the city.
Yeah. It makes you think about what's most important to people in their day-to-day lives, right?
Exactly. And then Anna jumps in and she talks about how cities offer more opportunities, for education, for jobs, for just having fun. But then she also mentions the obvious downsides, like how crowded it can be and the pollution.
Right. It's like she gives this quick rundown of the main things you have to trade off. So what stands out to you most in this first part of the conversation?
I think Harry's point about individual priorities.
Yeah.
He says that the better choice really depends on your lifestyle and what's important to you. Yeah. If you want peace and simplicity, you choose the village.
Yeah.
If you like a fast-paced environment with lots of options, you go for the city. It just shows that there's no one right answer for everybody.
Exactly. And then Patrick adds to that. He talks about how in a village you have these close relationships with people and a real sense of belonging. He even mentions having a reliable support network, which can be a huge factor for people. It shows how important it is to feel connected.
I see what you mean. But Anna also points out that cities offer something different. Diversity. You get exposed to so many different cultures, and that can really broaden your perspective, which is also a big draw for some people.
Yeah.
Like some people really crave that kind of intellectual and social stimulation, beyond what they'd find in a smaller, more close-knit community.
It's really interesting how they seem to reach this sort of like balanced understanding in the end. They all agree that both city life and village life have good and bad points. They're not saying one is better than the other. It's all about what fits you personally. It's not even just about location. It's about, finding an environment that matches your values.
Yeah. And Patrick even suggests that, maybe you could find a balance between the two.
Oh, yeah. He says, if at all possible.
Right. Yeah. If you can.
Yeah.
And Anna agrees. She says experiencing both can give you a real appreciation for what each has to offer.
Right.
So there are no easy answers here. But I think this conversation helps us understand that different environments appeal to different needs and different things people want.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on from where we might live to who or what we might share our living space with.
Yeah.
Pets. This next conversation is between Harry and Anna.
Okay.
And it's a really good example of that internal struggle and then the external discussion that a lot of people go through when thinking about getting a pet.
Yeah.
Harry is clearly excited about the idea. And he really wants to get a dog.
Okay. What do you think about Anna's reaction?
Well, she immediately brings up all the practical stuff, doesn't she? Like she talks about how much work it is and the responsibility and the potential for allergies and health problems. She's definitely focusing on the less glamorous side of having a pet.
Right. It shows how different people zero in on different aspects of a decision.
Yeah.
She's got some really good points about the long-term commitment involved. Like she's worried about the mess and the potential damage a pet could cause, which are definitely things you have to think about. And this creates this interesting contrast with Harry, who's more focused on the emotional benefits, like the companionship and how pets can reduce stress. It's that classic battle between what your heart wants and what your head tells you.
Totally. And Harry tries to address those practical concerns by talking about training and being a responsible pet owner. He's saying, that a well-behaved pet wouldn't be a huge burden.
Right.
He's obviously put some thought into this.
Yeah.
And I think his wanting a dog specifically comes from this desire for loyalty and affection. And even, like maybe having a dog would motivate him to be more active.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about what specific needs we're hoping a pet will fill.
It does. And those are all valid reasons to want a pet, right? All those positive things. But then Anna keeps asking him about how much time and energy he has. And that forces him to really confront the commitment that comes with taking care of a dog. It's not just about the initial excitement.
No, it's the day-to-day reality. And I think Anna's role in this conversation is really important.
Yeah.
She's not saying no to Harry's idea.
Yeah.
But she's making him think critically about it.
Right.
Her advice to do research and really consider everything before getting a pet is really responsible. It highlights that getting a pet isn't just about those cute, cuddly moments. It's a big commitment of your time, your energy, your resources. What do you think the main takeaway is here when it comes to making decisions?
I think the key is considering different perspectives before you make a big decision in your life. Like Harry's enthusiasm is balanced out by Anna's practicality, and that leads them to a more thoughtful evaluation of the situation.
Right.
It shows that good decision-making often means looking at both the emotional side and the practical side.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears completely and talk about Patrick's breakup.
Okay, this is where that audio gets a lot more emotional. Anna and Patrick are talking about his recent breakup. And the reason he gives: infidelity. It's clearly a painful topic. You can hear it in their voices. It's a lot heavier than the other conversations.
Definitely. The first thing that stands out is how empathetic Anna is.
Yeah.
She says, "Oh no, what happened? You look really down." Right away, she's being supportive and understanding. And when Patrick tells her why they broke up, she says, "Patrick, that's terrible. I can't imagine how you must be feeling right now." It really shows how much she cares. It's a great example of how to react when someone's going through something tough.
Yeah. And you can feel Patrick's pain when he says, "I don't even know what to do. I thought she was the one."
Yeah.
That sense of being lost and betrayed really comes through. It reminds us how vulnerable we all are in relationships.
And Anna does exactly what a good friend would do. She acknowledges his pain, but she also reassures him that he'll get through it and that he deserves better. She doesn't downplay how he feels, but she still gives him hope for the future. It's a tricky balance to strike. Her advice is also really practical and kind. Like, she tells him to take time for himself.
Yeah.
Focus on his hobbies. Spend time with people who care about him.
Right.
Those are all important things to do when you're going through a tough time.
It reminds us how crucial it is to have people you can rely on and to take care of yourself.
Exactly.
And Patrick feels so lost and confused, like he can't understand why this happened.
Right.
It's totally normal to feel that way when someone cheats on you. It's like this huge betrayal of trust that can really mess with your self-esteem.
Right.
And make you question everything about relationships. It's like trying to make sense of something that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And Anna keeps telling him that he deserves better. And then she said that classic line, "Time heals all wounds."
Yeah.
Which may be cliche, but it's often true. And it gives him this sense of hope.
Yeah.
This whole conversation really shows the importance of empathy and support when someone's hurting. What do you think this tells us about communication in times of crisis?
It shows how important it is to really listen to someone and offer genuine comfort.
Yeah.
It helps us stay connected to each other.
Yeah.
And helps us get through tough times. It's not about giving advice or trying to fix things. It's about being there for someone, letting them know you understand.
Exactly.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about what these conversations can teach someone who's learning English.
Oh, yeah. Since these podcasts are designed for English practice, there are some good language lessons hidden in these conversations. For you, our listener, who's all about learning efficiently and thoroughly, these audio snippets are a gold mine.
Absolutely.
Just by listening, you can improve your language skills. You hear real, everyday English being spoken, with different rhythms and vocabulary being used in context.
What's especially helpful is that these are just ordinary conversations. It's not like those textbook dialogues that sound so unnatural.
Yeah.
This is how native speakers actually talk.
Right.
And that's super beneficial for understanding spoken English. picking up on those subtle little things and how people say things, and ultimately improving your own speaking.
And remember how they explain that phrase, pros and cons? It's like learning built right into the conversation.
Yeah.
Those little explanations can really help you understand new words and ideas.
Absolutely.
And the podcast even encourages you to use the language actively.
Right.
Like they suggest you talk to yourself, which might sound weird.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to practice forming sentences and speaking more fluently in a safe, comfortable environment.
It's about getting your mouth and your brain working together in English.
Exactly. But maybe the best tip they give, and this is perfect for you, our listener, who wants to learn quickly and have those aha moments, is the benefit of listening to natural speech patterns. By hearing how different people put sentences together, use idioms, express themselves. You're soaking up so much information about how the language works.
And it's important to remember that you don't have to have perfect pronunciation right away. It's about getting comfortable with speaking, figuring out where you can improve, and realizing that learning a language is an ongoing process. It takes consistent exposure and practice.
So even in these simple conversations, there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
Not just about life and relationships, but about English itself. It's all connected.
It really is. And going back to what we said at the beginning about this deep dive, we've seen how these everyday chats give us insights into how people approach big life choices.
Yeah.
Like where to live or whether or not to get a pet.
Right.
We've also seen the challenges of dealing with personal struggles and how important it is to offer support during those times.
So the big takeaway here is that even in the most ordinary conversations, there's a wealth of knowledge to be found about how we communicate, the different ways we see things, and how we deal with life's ups and downs. And for you, our listener, these excerpts are not just entertaining. They're also practical examples of how English is spoken. And they offer strategies for learning the language.
Exactly. And this brings us to a final thought for now. It goes back to the idea of balance that we talked about with the village versus city conversation. Thinking about all the different perspectives and priorities we've heard today, like the appeal of a quiet village versus a busy city, the joy of having a pet versus the responsibility, the need for personal strength and support when things are tough.
Yeah.
What kind of balance are you looking for in your own life? Is it a balance between different places, different responsibilities, or maybe even different ways of learning and growing?
That's a really interesting question to consider. We hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about and maybe a new appreciation for how much you can learn, even from simple everyday conversations.
Yeah.
Keep exploring, keep listening, and keep using what you learn in your own life. Until next time.
See you then.